Hi there, it's Mary Charleson here from 5minutemarketing.com. Welcome back to this week's Insight. This past Friday, I decided to host a one-year reunion for my virtual happy hours that I started around this time last year when we declared it a pandemic. It was a way to check in with some of my global colleagues from around the world to see how we were doing, adapting, changing, not only from a business perspective, but also just from a country perspective as we went through different phases of this whole thing. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of revisit it. I stopped doing the virtual happy hours in early July. I thought they had sort of served their purpose. We had met each week for 16 weeks at that stage. But I thought it'd be interesting to revisit and to go back and check with the various members. And so I invited them for a virtual one-time event to check in and see. And from that, I've drawn some interesting kind of observations of how they've dealt with things. And I think it really has some impact for marketers as we're thinking how people have been changed by this last year. So I think it can best be summed up by kind of three kind of common buckets and themes. And that would be a period of intense creativity, new beginnings, and also growth through learning. So I'm going to take you through a couple of stories of the folks who came, participated. Numerous ones sent me updates. And so I've just picked a handful from each of these to represent each category, because I think it will give us some insights. So this period of intense creativity is kind of fascinating. Guy Marriage, who is an architect by training, he is also an instructor at the University of Wellington. A year ago, he had arrived in North America to do his book tour for his book called Tall, The Design and Construction of High-Rise Architecture. He no sooner arrived in North America and he essentially had to hightail it back to New Zealand. So he spent his last year writing his second book. In fact, when we got together on our call, he had just sent his manuscript off to his publisher. So fascinating. He sort of, hauled up at his seaside batch, as he calls it, and spent the year creating and writing, and also doing a little bit of some teaching, instructional teaching as well online. Tracy Brown, out of Colorado, she's a speaker friend of mine. She's a body language expert. And she, not unlike a lot of other speakers, myself included, had our calendars essentially wiped out as of March. Face-to-face conferences weren't happening. Still, many are challenged and have gone to virtual. So she did two things. She started doing a podcast, which was quite effective. But a big thing that she got into was this idea of doing a TV pilot. And so she went out and she hired a script writer from, very well-known script writer out of Hollywood, worked with some photographers and filmers, and she essentially filmed a TV pilot called Truth, Lies, and Cover-Ups. And it's now being pitched out in Hollywood, Arts and Entertainment, A&E, and Netflix. And I had the pleasure of attending her online premiere, and it was pretty freaking awesome. So she used the year creatively to represent what it is that she does as a professional, and will hopefully leverage this into not only another way to generate income, but to represent herself professionally out there in the industry. Susan Jarama created the Grand Connection, an online virtual networking group that, again, brought together people from all around the world. But she took this thing to scale. And she now, her meetings are bi-weekly, and she's boasting 1,000 members and usually gets about 100 plus attendees in her bi-weekly meetings. So it was definitely the right time and place for Susan with the Grand Connection. Barb Cameron is a digital consultant for Collier's Real Estate by day, but she is a food and travel photographer by passion. And she admitted to initially she went into a bit of a COVID cave, not unlike a lot of people, and kind of didn't really quite know what to make of all of this, but she dug her way out and she returned to her roots and where her passions are. And she reported that she had just got back into her kind of food photography, and she's just been shortlisted out of 10,000 entries for the prestigious Pink Lady Food Photographer Contest. And again, all of these things are, I will share in the blog post. I'll share links to some of these things that folks were doing. She also is planning a trip to the Arctic in the summer, late summer, August, September, in a Volkswagen van. And so she's getting back into her travel passions as well. So it wasn't just creativity. It was kind of a year of new beginnings for a lot of folks. Kit Parks, a good friend of mine, is a travel blogger at Adventure. She's got a travel podcast, and she realized that her life was too complicated. When she wanted to go traveling, she had her business, she had a trailer park rental business, she had her house, what she needed to do was kind of scale down her whole life. And so I believe it was in August, late summer, she sold the business, and then in the fall, she sold her house. So she has now put all of her possessions in storage, and she is traveling around the United States in a Mercedes van, kind of one of those high vans, and she's kind of tricked it all out. And she calls it Sophie. And she is traveling the US and planned to go to Europe in the fall, provided that the borders open up. Eventually, she'll return somewhere in the States and unpack her belongings that are in storage and decide where she wants to live. Denise Kelly, a good friend of mine I play hockey with. She's a franchise consultant with A&W Canada, and as well as Dogtopia. Many businesses were impacted initially, and so she, as a contractor, was also impacted and saw her work with them end or be significantly downsized. So she saw this as an opportunity to kind of launch herself into a next phase of life. And so they sold the real estate from North Vancouver and have moved up the Sunshine Coast, where she can work remotely. Her husband is working remotely and is looking forward to kind of a new adventure in life, being oceanside. Kim Little, Canadian realtor, saw her best year ever in 2020, and she's been in the game through numerous ups and downs in the economy. It just goes to speak how this whole disruptive thing around real estate and the ballooning of real estate values and people shifting where they're living to larger spaces, she really benefited by that, because she admits in the first half of the year she was a little bit panicked about what was going to happen because of the pandemic. Anik Balrick is formerly a prof and head of instructional design at Georgian College. She's my age. We went to kindergarten and university together. She took it as an opportunity for early retirement and decided that with enough health challenges on her own, that she didn't need this additional coping with the pandemic and distance learning. She took it as an opportunity to just make a shift. And now she's enjoying her newfound freedom and looking forward to gardening once the snow clears back in Ontario. But it wasn't just professional growth and learning that dominated the conversation. Many noted on the call or through private emails that they'd taken up new activities. They'd learned to cross-country ski, they'd learned to surf, they'd gotten back into biking, they were enjoying baking, they rediscovered their passion for gardening. In fact, I found myself falling in love with Vancouver all over again. I moved out here in my 20s and, loved the mountains, loved the ocean. And admittedly, I've loved that all the time here, but I took this as an opportunity to ski super often during the week, cross country, downhill, and really sort of fell in love with the things that drew me here in the first place. And that was kind of re-energizing as well. Also had an opportunity to charter a 45-foot Bavaria sailboat and go up into Desolation Sound in late August with some good friends, 7 of us on a boat. And again, for my husband and I, it was a great opportunity, because this is what we did back in our 20s and early 30s, is that we sailed and chartered boats with the sailing club. And so it was kind of like rediscovering our passions again. And definitely a credit to COVID for having done that, because this was a charter that had been booked out a year in advance by Americans that had to give it up because of the inability to cross the border. The third area was interesting beyond, beyond new beginnings, beyond intense creativity. The third area was kind of growth through learning. And speakers, David Guthrow, Tracy Brown, and myself included, as I said, we saw our face-to-face speaking completely disappear, during the beginning of the year, and has been still largely impacted. So we've had to adapt to a virtual environment. And along with that has come a lot of adaptations in technology. And, We've utilized our CAPS Association, NSA connections, countless online support groups to kind of help us trick out studios, not unlike this, and be able to deliver solid material to our clients in new and exciting ways. For many, this may well be a net gain with the virtual business when we get back to face, and for some, it may well shift their primary delivery models. You'd think the pandemic and its impact on travel would have seen Colleen Stimbro, who's the CEO of TIMA, Travel Industry Marketing Association, kind of tearing her hair out in the States. And indeed she did for the first part of the year, but she took this as an opportunity to kind of make the shifts required and keep her association members engaged and employed. And now certainly, we look to be emerging into a time period of intense demand for travel once it's opened up. And I'd like to kind of think that maybe helped her out a little bit along the way with some consulting in that area. So again, she was afraid, and then things appear to be kind of pulling out. For instructors, university instructors, myself included, numerous other ones, that are in my circles, we saw classes switch to online learning this year. And it's incredible personal growth that we've all had to go through to not only learn new technology and adapting it to learning outcomes for the virtual classroom, but also, to work with our students and some of their challenges. Some embraced it, some had real issues with it. And I would like to think that COVID kind of pushed education forward 10 years. And hopefully, it was obviously tough on some instructors and not all adapted well. And it may well lead to a healthy injection of new talent, ones that are willing to embrace technology and provide an exit door for those who are not. And in the end, maybe that's not a bad thing. But I would like to think that we will take the net gain of all of this and take what we learned and bring it into the classroom and be able to mesh this kind of joint delivery of having that face-to-face, but also getting the best of both worlds with online. So, what's to be learned from this as marketers? A lot, I would say. It's just a small sampling, but it does represent some sort of bigger, trends in, how life has shifted. We've seen this, we'll see this, pattern out on consumers at a larger level, I'm sure. It also demonstrates, I'm afraid, on a deep level, how this has impacted different demographic and class structures in different ways. For sure, the group, by and large, that I was interacting with were able to see the positive, resilient spin out of this. But it hasn't been an easy year for people in frontline positions, service sector, those in the hospitality and travel industry as well. So I just, acknowledge that it is very much divided different ways that people have been impacted. But I'm fascinated by the way that this will all play out. And, will there be an audience for all this new stuff that's been creative? Books written, movies created, courses created, because of all the creativity. Will there be an audience for it? Will remote work continue? Will it grow, or will it be scaled back? Will educators attempt to roll a calendar back to 2019, or will they see some net gains with virtual learning? Will major shifts in lifestyle that took place during the pandemic continue with no regrets? What about business travel? Will it be changed forever by the ability to meet in an online environment? What about conferences and meetings? Will adaptations that we've made become permanent as we shift forward? And I think there's another area that we have to consider, and that's this unintentional consequences. And that's probably a longer term impact. And that will be a bigger thing for us to navigate over the coming years of business. Because there's a lot of unintentional consequences of the pandemic that we won't actually see until kind of time rolls along and we start to realize that there are changes in behaviors that will have a larger impact on marketers and business going forward. Many things will shape the psychology and the consumer behavior forever. will common colds and flus become a thing of the past with our increased hygiene? You know, how does that impact the entire kind of pharmaceutical category of, you know, cold medications? Will that go away, or will that, you know, be reshaped in some way? You know, how about a generation of children who are at a critical age for socialization, who have now been kind of taught that the only people that can hug them or touch them are their parents? How will that play out over their lifetimes in terms of support mechanisms and friendships? How about, you know, the last year, and how did it shape how it's shaped our young adults, many of whom have been asked to just be kind of idle, put their travel plans on hold, put their gap years on hold, their study years where they traditionally might have gone away to school, where they've been living at home and learning online. And so they haven't been subject to those external peer forces and the things that help them mature as young adults. Instead, they become more dependent rather than independent within a home environment. You know, just the whole work from home trend, you know, and its impact on the way we design our houses going forward, the type of real estate which is in demand, for that matter, the way that urban cores are designed for businesses and offices, and the whole transit and everything that goes with that. You know, how will that play out and impact real estate? So, you know, there's many, many unintentional consequences of this pandemic. Some of them are positive and some of them are negative as well. And no doubt there will be opportunity emerge amidst all of this change as it becomes evident, you know, the things that will remain permanent. But one thing I know for certain is, if we're looking for 2019 in this year or next year, we won't be finding it. That past is gone forever. And it's time for us to adapt to the change, see this as an opportunity where life changed and shifted, and we are able to move forward and hopefully take advantage of those opportunities. Thanks for being here. And thanks for joining us when you're able to on these videos and in the blog posts on 5minutemarketing.com. We'll see you next time, and thanks for being here.